Hi, everybody. Welcome to another week. Thank you all for being so good and hanging in there. We are almost done with this semester, and it has been a trying time for all of us as we transition into this new lifestyle. Please keep in mind that I know all of us are struggling with all of this, and it's always best to try your best to remain in the same schedule, the same lifestyle as what you had before, for morale especially. Please let me know if I can help in any way. I hope that each of you continue with your real estate journey. I know it's been very interesting with this market and what is going on financially. The Board of Realtors has fought really hard to make themselves known as an essential worker. So the realtors and a lot of the support staff, financial officers are still continuing to work in real estate as an essential worker. I wanted to go back a few chapters and kind of give you a little summary since I haven't been able to post anything as far as video-wise for a while. It's been pretty difficult working out there at the hospitals as an emergency COVID tester for the county. So this is my first opportunity to do so. We are experiencing a little bit of a slowdown right now in the amount of tests, so I've been able to take at least a couple of hours off today, a couple of days off last weekend, so I was able to catch up, but I will be catching up on grading hopefully this week. Let's go back when we talk about how to value a property for real estate, for an appraisal. How would you do that? And the three basic methodologies that we have in appraisal to value something is using either of the three approaches to value. The first one being the cost approach, the second one being the sales comparison approach, and then the third one being the income approach. In order to do the sales or the cost approach, you first need to value the site, the value of the land itself, because the cost approach will just give you the value of the improvements, the structures on the house. The land has to be valued separately, so you would need to look at existing sales or land sales to see what is the value of the land itself, and then add in the value of the improvements. That's the cost approach. You want to know how much it costs to build a structure, and you would use different methods, whether it be a comparative unit or the square footage cost to build, which are the same. You use a market factors on the builders, what they say it costs to build for the labor and the materials and all of the stuff that go into building a particular dwelling, depending on the quality. This is how much per square foot it costs. So then you would take the structure itself, let's say a 2,000 square foot structure, multiply it by the cost to build. That'll give you how much it costs to build for the structure itself. Then you have to add in the land value. After you add in the land value, what do you have to do next? Well, not all properties in San Diego or the world are new. So you have to take into account depreciation. How much value has been lost over time due to the fact that this property is no longer new? Well, how do you do that? What about depreciation? How do you estimate that? That is the most difficult part of the cost approach, is estimating depreciation, that loss in value, whether it be functional, physical, or exterior or external, or I've also heard it as economic. The physical deterioration is just the wear and tear of a property over time, which is pretty easy to determine that, hey, this is not new anymore. This carpet has been worn down. These walls are no longer fresh new white paint. The property itself is experiencing some physical depreciation on the exterior. The stucco may be cracking. There may be, the roof needs to be replacing. That is the physical loss in value due to depreciation. Functional is how the property functions. When you go into a property and there's a wall right there in the entryway, A lot of times people find that very off-putting. They don't like that, hey, that's very, stop right there, very unwelcoming. So a lot of the times people remediate that, or they have to fix the functional layout of a property. Let's say you walk in through the front door and you walk into your dining room. A lot of people don't like that. They want you to go into a living room or a more formal setting, or a family room, which is an informal setting. So they would need to remodel the property to fix the functional layout of that property. If the property was older, built before interior plumbing, then a lot of times it doesn't have a functional kitchen or a functional plumbing system for a bathroom. So that would need to be fixed, because that's a functional error in the build itself that people need. Over time, people's wants and desires change. So if you have something specific to that era, and as time changes and as things and people develop their tastes, that needs to change as well. That's a functional depreciation. External is the loss in value due to something happening outside of the property that is not really in your control, whether that be traffic, busy street, noisy neighbors, possibly external noise, or a dump site right next to your property. That is something you have to deal with, being so close to this particular property. A lot of times I have this one property that is a residential property, but it's located right next to commercial. So there is a metal shop right next to it, which has experiences a lot of noise. That is an external depreciation this property has to deal with. Sometimes you have to value a property due to its proximity to a dump or to a scrapyard or recycling plant. That value is definitely lost due to the fact that this property is so close to this detrimental impairment that's going on in this particular area. So estimating depreciation is pretty difficult. Most of the time we would use an economic age life method, which if you look on your files system under the files tab, there is the cost values there. And at the bottom is the depreciation straight line method, meaning if a property is built today, it's estimated that it would live, or it would be good for approximately 60 years. So today, built today, it has a 60-year lifespan. It's 100% good. In 5 years, it has lost 5% of its value, so therefore it is 95% good. It has lost 5% of value, so you would need to take 5% off of the cost to build on that property, because it is now older, it is not new. And as time goes on, the curve continues. So we have the value here as 100% new, the cost to value, the cost that it costs to build, and then as time goes on, we have this curve that goes very low as time goes on. Will it get all the way down to zero? Well, yes, if people do not remodel, rehab, or update the property as needed. If the property gets demolished, then obviously, yes, the value is then zero. However, the curve does go down as time goes on, because people will pay less for an older property compared to a newer property. We could also use the sales comparison approach to estimate depreciation, saying, okay, this comp is 100% new, this comp is 15 years old. What is the value between the two? Obviously, the new one should bring more value to the market, keeping in mind all the other things associated with this property are the same. Same square footage, same bedroom, bathroom, same location generally, and same quality. The Marshall and Swift handbook is extremely important for appraisers, because this is how we value that loss or that depreciation or that cost to build. We have this handbook that's put out by Marshall and Swift every few years, and they tell us, based on this quality, this is how much per square foot it costs to build this quality property. So you would multiply that times the size of your property times the cost to build, let's say $200 a square foot. And that would give you the value that it costs to build this property. Then you have to take in depreciation. You multiply that times your depreciation scale, your age life method, and you add in the value of your site. So that is basically the cost approach to value. Sales comparison. The sales comparison is using the principle of substitution, where you're substituting a property, a comparable property that is similar to your subject for another one. This is based on the principle that buyers will not pay any more for a property to acquire than the equal substitute of a property of the same utility, meaning it'll bring the same use if I acquire this property and this property next door, 3 doors down or 2 streets over, is basically the same school district, same neighborhood, same community. However, that price will be influenced by your subject. So we know that no two properties are the same. So we have to make adjustments to those sales comparables to value your subject. And it's pretty self-explanatory, meaning you are taking 3 to 5 comps of sales comparisons that have already sold, historical facts, sales price, and you are comparing those properties to your subject. You need to adjust those comparables to make them as similar to the subject as possible. You would make those adjustments based on the sale itself, whether it was an open market sale transaction. If it was a FHA, VA, you need to make adjustments on that sale. Then you need to make physical adjustments on that based on, is it bigger in size? You need to make an adjustment on the square footage, the bedroom bathroom count, the lot size, the location, the quality of construction, and also the condition of the property. So let's say, for example, one of your comps has a pool, but your subject does not. So we need to make a downward adjustment on that comp to compare it, to make it more comparable to the subject. So we would take that pool and we would need to take off value off that sales price in order to make it more comparable to your subject, because obviously that has an amenity that your subject does not. So we need to take off value on that comp, because that sales price includes the value of that pool. So if the pool cost $50,000 to build, would we take $50,000 off of the sales price? No, not usually. Pools don't usually have the same return to market value as it costs to build. As a rule of thumb, I usually use about $15,000 to $30,000, depending on the quality, the location, the size, and the construction of the pool. If you were to say that cost for that pool was $50,000 and it cost about $65 per square foot to build, well, new, it would be $50,000. However, what has happened over time? Depreciation, right? And the fact that the pool is no longer new. So you would need to use that straight H line method in order to take off value to that pool. You could also do a paired sales adjustment, saying, okay, I have 2 sales. They're very similar to each other. One of them has a pool, one of them does not. The value between the 2 is about $10,000 greater. Well, I'm going to then use that as an adjustment value to take off that value to my comp to compare it to my subject. So you need to grid out your sales where you have your subject property there on the left and you have your other 3 to 5 comps on the right. And you would need to make adjustments for the square footage, the lot, the bedroom, bathroom count, any amenities, quality of construction, and at the bottom you're taking off value or adding value as needed based on the cost to build. You would have a range of values after you make all these adjustments. So let's say you have these 3 sales, you've already made your adjustments, now you're coming back with a range of values anywhere between $525 to $575. So that is your range of values right there that your subject property should fall into if you've made all the adequate adjustments. After you have your range, you're going to then determine where should my subject be within that range. Is my subject comparable to these three properties? Is it in better shape? Is it in worse shape? Is it on the lower end of the spectrum, or is it on the higher end of the spectrum? Or is it right there in the middle, very, very average in that range? That is where you're going to determine how you're going to value your property. After you've got your range of values, where does your subject fall within that range? Yes, you can provide that whole range of values for your subject for the valuation. However, a lot of people don't like that $75,000 difference between valuations. So if you look at page 301 in your book, you'll see that grid and how these adjustments have been made. Now, it can be made on a price per square foot or a percentage of the sales price. A lot of appraisers could do both. Most of the time, though, we make an adjustment on a price per square foot using a Marshall & Swift handbook. The costs that are posted on the files link on the Canvas site will give you the cost to build, let's say a D6, a dwelling 6 made out of wood, is an average quality property. A D5 is slightly below average, meaning built before about 1950 and before. A D7 is a good quality construction. D8 is very good, and D9 and 10 is high quality construction. So if you use those cost factors times depreciation, that should give you a good valuation method on how you would use these as an appraiser to value your subject. And if you can see on page 306, they have used the URAR form, which is the Uniform Residential Appraisal Report, which is a standard form for reporting that a lot of appraisers use. That form is also available in the Files tab in your Canvas shell. All right, so that was sales comparison approach. The last approach is the income approach. And the income approach is using the income and valuation for an investment purpose. We would use this to determine the value of a property by analyzing the income that a property produces. So people buy investment type properties because they're expecting a rate of return, meaning this is the relationship between your income and your value. That you're going to require in order to make this investment on a property. So let's say, for example, and a lot of people ask me, why or how do I determine a good capitalization rate or rate of return if I want to make this investment on a property? And what I say is, well, what percentage do you look for when you're looking for an investment? Let's say you're making an investment in the stock market. What percentage or rate of return do you want to get back on that initial investment? If the average price that you're going to get back on an investment is 4%, well then obviously you want that rate of return to be at the minimum of a 4% capitalization rate. But you do have to keep in mind, what is the market doing right now? Are they providing a 3% rate of return, 2% rate of return? You have to take into account, are you going to be expecting a higher rate of return than what the market is utilizing currently? The rate of return, normally what we talk about in the income approach to property, is known as the capitalization rate, or the overall rate, OAR, or the direct cap rate. It could be known as several of those, so don't let it confuse you. It's very simple. What you would do, well, for the most part, you would take the income that a property produces, and in the form of income that a property produces is rent. So you would take that total rent times the number of units times the number of months in a year. So normally you would take your 12 months of rent. You would then divide it by your capitalization rate, that rate that you're hoping to get back on your investment, to give you your value, or what you should be paying for that property to get that rate of return back on your value. It is an inverse relationship. So basically a simple mathematical formula where you take income divided by cap rate to give you your value. If you're given your value and your capitalization rate, then you can multiply those two to get your income. It's a very inverse relationship. The multiplier, which is also another form of getting income rates, like a capitalization rate, is another method people can use normally for smaller units, 2 units, 4 units. The capitalization rate is for any units that are, 4 and above. That's when you would like to use a capitalization rate, or for a commercial property, or for a manufacturing property, office property. Any of those type of properties, you'd want to use a capitalization rate. The multipliers, either the gross income multiplier or the gross rent multiplier, is basically the same. It's a multiplier. So you're going to take your income that you're producing over the 12-year month span, times that rate, that gross rent multiplier or gross income multiplier, to get the value of the property. And that gross income multiplier is pretty easily determined by the market. So if that particular area has a gross rent multiplier of 11, you're not going to get a 14% gross rent multiplier back. You want to stay within that market area. That's what the normal rate of return is for that particular area. In order to get the capitalization rate, or to determine the value of a property, you want to reproduce the operating statement that a company or that a property produces. So you're going to estimate your income, which is your market rent times 12, because there's 12 months in a year. So that's your income, your projected gross income for the entire year. Then you're going to subtract expenses, all those costs it costs you to have this income producing property. Whether it be vacancy, you have a vacancy rate, whether it be the cost of electricity, of water, if you're paying for that, whether it be any type of insurance or maintenance fees, you're going to take off all of those expenses that it costs to have and produce this property for the full year. And that's on page 324. So if you look, there's a recreated operating statement on 324 that shows you have your income minus your expenses, gives you your net operating income, your NOI. That is the total net you have after you've paid all of the expenses. That NOI, net operating income, is then divided by your cap rate, that rate you want to get back on your return to get the value of that property. And it definitely can change over time as income increases or expenses increase and expenses go down or rent goes down. So you want to know, what is that rate the investor wants or what the market will allow. And our fully recreated statement is on page 372. So I hope that gives you a little more clarification on the 3 methods of appraisal. The good thing is, with all of this going on right now, we are going to completely eliminate the appraisal report from our whole grading system in this course. So I hope that gives you a little bit of relief. Most of the work will now just be online in class. It'll just be your essay questions, your appraisal as you're doing it, just for your knowledge and for the credits for either your essay for that week and the quizzes as well as the final. So let me know how you all are doing. I hope to see you all soon. Good luck.